Pennsylvania also, you can get arrested, and I started to talk about this a little bit earlier, for drugs other than alcohol or controlled substances. So we're talking about driving under the influence. And under the influence means under the influence of basically four major categories of drugs. The first category obviously being alcohol. The second category, prescription drugs. It may seem a little bit strange, but yes, it's possible that someone who's using an over-the-counter drug for a cold, for example, could have that over-the-counter drug. Just because they're over-the-counter drugs does not mean that they're not potent drugs and don't have effects on driving skills. So it is possible to get arrested for driving under the influence of over-the-counter drugs. Next category would be prescription drugs. Obviously, these are the drugs that are prescribed to you by your physician. So it is possible to get arrested in Pennsylvania for impaired driving as a result of a prescription medication. And then we have this whole category of illicit or illegal drugs. And it's against the law in Pennsylvania to drive under the influence of any of these illicit or controlled substances. And that would include things like marijuana, cocaine, heroin, methamphetamine. So the law is much more comprehensive than just driving under the influence of alcohol. Pennsylvania law does not allow individuals to drive under the influence of any controlled substance, and if that substance renders them incapable of safe driving, they can be convicted for driving under the influence. Also, combinations of drugs. So, for example, you can get arrested for driving under the influence of a combination of alcohol and an over-the-counter drug, for example. We know that alcohol can intensify the effects of some over-the-counter drugs. I had an individual in class who finished the workday, went home after work, wasn't feeling all that great. He had a cold and was coughing and congested. And what he decided to do was to take some Vicks NyQuil. Now, if you're familiar with Vicks NyQuil, on the top of the Vicks NyQuil bottle, the cap is actually a measuring cup. And when you take over-the-counter drugs, you're supposed to read the directions, follow the directions, and take the amount that is listed on the directions. Well, instead of using the measuring cup, he just bottomed up the Vicks NyQuil bottle and drank about a half a bottle of Vicks NyQuil under that thinking of, if a little bit's good for you, a lot must be better. So he took the Vicks NyQuil, laid down, still, felt lousy. The Vicks NyQuil didn't kick in and help with his cold symptoms. So he decided to get up and drink a beer. And so he drank one can of beer, a 12-ounce beer, and tried to lay down and relax and get some sleep, but still no luck, not feeling much better. So he thought, well, I think what I'll do, and he was out on the interstate in Pennsylvania, he decided what I'll do is I'll go out for a little ride in the car, and maybe I'll start to feel the effects of the NyQuil and feel a little bit better, come home and I'll be able to sleep. And he also decided to take a beer with him while he was out on the road. So you can sort of get where this story is going. While he was out driving, he was pulled over by a police officer who suspected that he was driving under the influence. He was given the field sobriety test, failed the field sobriety test, showed signs of impairment, and that he was too impaired for safe driving. And as a result, he was placed under arrest for driving under the influence. And the police officer out in the field asked him, have you been drinking tonight? And strangely enough, when the police officer asked people that, most people give an honest answer. If they were drinking, most people say, yes, I was drinking. And that was his response. Yes, I was drinking. The second question the police officer usually asks is, how much have you been drinking? And here's where it gets a little interesting, because the response typically is, well, I've only had a couple. Now, you're not saying whether you had a couple 40s or a couple 6-packs, but that was this guy's answer. He said, yes, I've been drinking, and I only had a couple beers. So the police officer, after he placed him under arrest, took him in for a chemical test for blood alcohol concentration, and lo and behold, the chemical test revealed that his blood alcohol concentration was 0.02. Now that's a very, very low blood alcohol concentration. It's well below the per se level of intoxication of 0.08 in Pennsylvania. But the reality of it is that out there when he did the field sobriety test, the guy was hammered. And the reason why was because he had combined the over-the-counter drug, Vicks NyQuil, and all the ingredients that are in Vicks NyQuil, and then combined it with a little bit of alcohol. So he had a very low blood alcohol concentration, did not meet the per se level for DUI in Pennsylvania, but because he had combined it with another category of drugs, he was arrested for driving under the influence of alcohol in combination with another controlled drug. This next aspect of Pennsylvania DUI law, I think, is very, very important for people who are attending the alcohol safe driving school and obviously have already been arrested for driving under the influence. And this aspect of the DUI law in Pennsylvania deals with driving during suspension of your license as a result of your DUI. So in other words, you have lost your license as a result of driving under the influence. There are very severe penalties if you get caught driving while your license has been suspended for driving under the influence. So the penalty for driving during suspension as a result of your DUI is a mandatory $500 fine and 60 to 90 days in jail. So you can see that the expectation is that you will comply with that loss of license as a result of your DUI. A second way you can experience severe penalties as a result of having your license suspended for DUI is if you are driving with a blood alcohol concentration. So driving under suspension, that is a violation in and of itself. A more severe version of that violation is to be driving under suspension and actually have a blood alcohol concentration. And if your BAC is 0.02 or higher, and you have been driving while your license has been suspended for DUI, that's a mandatory 90 days in jail and a $1,000 fine plus additional license suspension. So I want to emphasize to you while you're completing this course, we know you are going to have situations where you might need transportation. And I think one of the important aspects of not getting into further trouble as a result of your DUI is to plan to have transportation arranged for you so that you are not driving while your license has been suspended for DUI. So very, very serious penalties associated with driving while your license has been suspended for a DUI conviction. Another aspect of the DUI law in Pennsylvania is something called ignition interlock. And this is a system that is placed on an automobile, and it requires the individual to actually complete a breath test. The ignition interlock system will measure that you're not under the influence of alcohol and allow your car to be started. So in Pennsylvania, the law requires an individual convicted of a second DUI offense that they must have an approved ignition interlock system installed on each motor vehicle they own, operate, or lease. And that needs to be for 1 year before they are eligible, before you are eligible, then to apply for an unrestricted license, and you can have the ignition interlock removed. Another thing that Pennsylvania DUI law permits is the use of an occupational limited license. This allows an individual who has been arrested for driving under the influence to seek a limited license that allows them to drive to and from their home and their job. It also applies to students, so you'll be able to drive from home to school and back. And it also would permit driving to mandated treatment programs and returning home. All other driving, other than those limited things for job, school, or going to mandated drug and alcohol or designated drug and alcohol treatment programs, all other driving remains under suspension. So even if you have an occupational limited license and you are caught driving with a limited occupational license, and it's not for job, school, or treatment, then the previous aspect of driving under suspension that we just talked about would apply. So occupational limited license is really to help recognize that loss of license can create a hardship for people. Certainly, we don't want people to lose their jobs if that's at all possible. And so Pennsylvania will, upon request, grant occupational limited driver's license. You have to petition the Department of Transportation for an occupational limited license. And in that petition, you have to identify the specific vehicle that will be driven, give reasons why the operation of that vehicle is essential for your occupation, work, or trade, or study. And it shall, on that petition, you also shall identify your employer, the educational institution that you're attending, or the treatment program that you're going to. So you have to be very, very specific about how you're going to use this license, and the license obviously can only be used for those purposes. Pennsylvania also requires individuals who get arrested for driving under the influence to undergo evaluation and assessment. You have probably already experienced one of these assessments. It's called the Court Reporting Network. It's a series of questions that you're asked about your DUI arrest and questions about how the use of drugs and alcohol affect your life, what happens to you when you typically drink, are you using any controlled substances. This is an assessment that helps understand not only your driving concerns associated with DUI, but as I said earlier, driving under the influence is also a health problem. And this is an opportunity to try and identify if drugs and alcohol are causing any more problems or significant problems in your life beyond getting arrested for driving under the influence. when you complete the court reporting network evaluation, if that evaluation recommends counseling or treatment, if you've had any prior DUI in the last 10 years, or you had a BAC greater than 0.16 at the time of arrest, then you are going to be required to have a drug and alcohol assessment completed by a licensed drug and alcohol provider. So there are two types of evaluation and assessment that you might experience or probably have experienced. One is the court reporting network evaluation, and then based on that finding and whether or not you've had a prior arrest or operating at the highest tier of 0.16, you may be required to undergo a drug and alcohol assessment by a treatment provider. Something else that Pennsylvania allows for is called accelerated rehabilitative disposition, and it's really a pre-trial intervention program, and it's designed as an alternative for first-time nonviolent DUI offenders. And what ARD does is it suspends the criminal justice process, and it puts the individual then into an education and therapeutic process. So ARD has an advantage of taking you out of the criminal justice system and giving you the opportunity as a first-time offender to not incur the most severe penalties associated with DUI, and also provides you the opportunity to not maintain a criminal record associated with DUI. If you do receive accelerated rehabilitative disposition, you must still comply with all of your probation conditions that you're going to experience as a result of receiving ARD. To be eligible for ARD, your DUI arrest has to be your first offense within 10 years. No one should have been injured. There should not have been any serious injuries as a result of your DUI. And there cannot have been a passenger in your vehicle under the age of 14 at the time of arrest. Those eligibility requirements are reviewed by the county district attorney in which you were arrested, and it will be the county DA's office that will make the determination as to whether or not you qualify for accelerated rehabilitative disposition, or ARD. Now, because you receive ARD, there are obvious benefits of ARD, but there are also things that you have to comply with. There is going to be a license suspension as a result of your DUI, even though you receive ARD. The suspension will be less than if you did not receive the ARD. You have to provide restitution to any person who suffered a financial loss as a result of your DUI, and you have to pay any other fees or charges that are associated with attending the alcohol safe driving school or having evaluation and treatment programs. You still must pay for those costs. And the court can establish additional conditions of your ARD, and you must comply with them. As already mentioned, even though you get ARD, you must attend the alcohol safe driving school, and you're going to be on probation, and probation supervision will range from 6 months up to a maximum of 12 months. Also, if your BAC was 0.16 or greater at the time of your arrest, or the CRIN evaluation indicates the need for a drug and alcohol assessment, you will have to complete that drug and alcohol assessment and pay for that assessment. Now, the benefit of ARD is something that's called expungement. So if a person successfully completes the ARD program, charges are legally dismissed. Pennsylvania expungement statute allows for those who received and completed ARD with no convictions in the last 10 years to have the record related to the offense expunged. And in order for that to occur, that won't happen automatically. You actually have to submit a petition to the Court of Common Pleas in the county where you were convicted for the DUI to request the ARD expungement. So that is one of the important benefits of receiving accelerated rehabilitative disposition. Those are some of the key aspects of DUI law in Pennsylvania that I think were important to review for anybody who is attending the Alcohol Safe Driving School. Hopefully the information helps you understand a little bit about some of the things that you've experienced as a result of your DUI. For example, why you're here completing the Alcohol Safe Driving School. And obviously, as mentioned, DUI law in Pennsylvania requires you to do that. So hopefully it gives you some further clarification about what you have experienced as you've been going through the DUI process. If you want to get further information about DUI law in Pennsylvania, you can actually go to the Pennsylvania DUI Association's webpage at padui.org. And on their webpage, up on the top, you can click on Information, and a drop-down box will appear. And at the bottom of that drop-down box, you can click on the motor vehicle code. Now, I'll let you know in advance, it's lengthy. It's pages and pages and pages of information. And, the Alcohol Safe Driving School is really not a course about DUI law, but it is important that we talk about important aspects of DUI law that relate to you. But it's a very comprehensive law, and if you want to check it out and get some more specific information about the law, you can go to the PA DUI Association's website.